How long do you think you're going to live? Take a second and actually guess a number. Most people guess low. Not by a year or two. By 5 to 7 years, according to research from the Society of Actuaries and the Employee Benefit Research Institute. And that gap, the space between what you think will happen and what actually happens, might be the single most dangerous number in your entire retirement plan. Not the market, not inflation, not even how much you saved. Just this one blind spot, sitting quietly underneath every other decision you make about money. And once you see the actual data, it will all make sense. So let's define what we're actually talking about. Longevity risk is the financial risk of living too long relative to your savings. Not dying too soon, living too long. It sounds like a strange thing to call a risk, because living a long life is supposed to be the goal. But in retirement planning, every extra year you're alive is another year your money has to stretch to cover. And if you didn't plan for that year, it doesn't just disappear. It shows up as a bill nobody sent you a warning about. Think about how retirement planning usually gets taught. Save aggressively. Hit a number. Retire. Withdraw a steady percentage every year and hope it lasts. That framework isn't wrong exactly, but it quietly assumes you know how many years that withdrawal needs to cover. And most people, understandably, guess based on family history or a rough sense of average life expectancy, without realizing that average life expectancy at birth is a completely different number than life expectancy at 65. A lot of people confuse the two, and that confusion alone accounts for a huge part of the 5 to 7 year underestimate. Here's the number that stops most people cold. According to Social Security Administration actuarial tables, a 65-year-old man today has a 50% chance of living to age 85. A 65-year-old woman has a 50% chance of living to 87. And for a married couple, both 65, there is a 50% chance that at least one of them is still alive at 92. Read that again. Not might, a 50% chance. That's a coin flip, not a long shot. Most people don't expect that. Most people, when they picture retirement, picture a 20-year runway. Retire at 65, plan through 85, done. It feels responsible. It feels conservative. But according to the SSA's own numbers, for a couple, 85 isn't the finish line. It's roughly the midpoint. And that's the part that catches people off guard. Not because they did the math wrong, but because they never ran this particular math at all. Most people plan around a single life expectancy figure, usually their own, and rarely think about it as a couple. But retirement isn't lived by one spouse in isolation. It's a shared financial system. And a shared system has to be measured by the longer of the two lifespans, not the average of the two, because the money still has to be there for whichever person is left. And this is where things get interesting. If you're planning for a 20-year retirement but the real horizon for a couple is closer to 27 years or more, you haven't built a cushion. You've built a shortfall with a delay switch on it. The plan looks fine for 2 decades. Everything feels on track. And then, right when you'd expect to be coasting, the money runs thin. Right at the exact moment you have the least ability to go back to work or absorb a shock. This is also why the 4% rule gets misapplied so often. The 4% rule, originally developed by financial planner William Bengen in a 1994 paper published in the Journal of Financial Planning, was built and stress-tested around a 30-year retirement horizon. That's the whole point of it. It was designed to survive 3 decades of market ups and downs. But a lot of people hear 4% rule and quietly apply it to a 20-year mental timeline instead, because that's how long they think they'll need the money. Which means, ironically, the very tool designed to make retirement safer gets used in a way that makes it less safe, not more, the moment your actual lifespan runs past 85. And longevity doesn't act alone. It amplifies something called sequence of returns risk, which is the danger of experiencing market downturns early in retirement, when you're also withdrawing money. The longer you live, the more downturns you statistically have to live through. A rough market in year 2 of retirement is a very different problem than a rough market in year 22. Living longer means more chances to be tested, not fewer. There's also a cost curve most people never see coming. According to research from EBRI, healthcare costs in retirement don't rise in a straight line. They escalate sharply after age 80. That means the most expensive phase of your retirement is often the one furthest from your planning horizon, the one you were least likely to have modelled for in the first place. So the years you're least prepared for financially are frequently the years that cost the most. Think about what that actually means in practice. The decade people plan for most carefully, the early 60s and 70s, is often the cheapest, healthiest stretch of retirement. And the decade people plan for the least, the 80s and beyond, is the one where costs quietly compound the hardest. It's a strange mismatch. The years that get the most attention need it the least, and the years that get almost no attention need it the most. But here's where things change. Once you understand longevity risk correctly, you stop treating Social Security as just a monthly check and start seeing it for what it actually is. It's longevity insurance. Every year you delay claiming Social Security, up to age 70, permanently increases your monthly benefit. Research from the Center for Retirement Research at Boston College shows that this delay functions almost like an insurance policy against living a long time. If you don't live that long, the trade-off costs you less than you'd think. But if you do, and statistically a lot of people do, that higher monthly benefit becomes one of the most valuable financial decisions you'll ever make, because it's guaranteed inflation-adjusted income that simply cannot run out. Now here's a part that doesn't get talked about enough. Women live longer than men, on average. And that means women, especially widows, carry a disproportionate share of longevity risk. A household often spends for decades as a dual-income, dual Social Security unit. Then one spouse passes, usually the husband, and the surviving spouse, usually the wife, is left managing a smaller income on a portfolio that already spent years supporting two people. According to AARP and multiple retirement researchers, this is one of the most overlooked financial cliffs in American retirement. Not because people are careless, because almost nobody plans a retirement timeline around the person most likely to live the longest. So, what does this actually mean for you? It means the entire framing needs to shift. Most people plan to not run out of money by 85. That's the wrong target. The better, more honest target, based on actual actuarial data, is to have enough by 92. That single shift changes almost everything downstream. It changes how aggressively you withdraw in your 60s and 70s. It changes when you or your spouse claims Social Security. It changes how much growth-oriented investment exposure, like stocks, you keep in the portfolio even after retiring, because a 27-year horizon still has room, and arguably a need, for growth, not just safety. Research from Vanguard on retirement income echoes this same point. Plans built for outdated, shorter time horizons tend to either run dry too early or force retirees into unnecessary austerity in their final years, cutting spending far more than they actually needed to. Neither outcome is good, and both come from the same root cause: underestimating how long the money actually has to last. If any of this feels unsettling, that's a completely normal reaction. This isn't about fear, it's about calibration. A lot of people hear these numbers and feel behind, like they should have known this years ago. You didn't, and that's fine, because almost nobody teaches this. It's not covered in a typical financial planning conversation, and it's rarely covered by the media either, because "you might live longer than you think" doesn't sound like a crisis. It sounds like good news, and in a way, it is. It's just good news that comes with a math problem attached. The tools already exist to fix this gap. The Social Security Administration has a free life expectancy calculator at ssa.gov. The Society of Actuaries built something called the Longevity Illustrator, available at longevityillustrator.org, specifically so regular people, not actuaries, can see personalized estimates of how long they and their spouse might actually need their money to last. A lot of people avoid this kind of number because it feels heavy. But avoiding it doesn't shrink the gap. It just delays the moment you find out about it, usually at the worst possible time. Knowing the real number, even when it's bigger and scarier than you expected, is what actually lets you build a plan that holds. So here's the real question. If there's a 50% chance you or your spouse is still here at 92, is your plan actually built for that person? Or is it quietly betting they won't be?